A worn-out pickup truck limped into the garage just minutes before the doors were set to close, its engine sputtering and groaning like it had fought its last battle. What unfolded over the next 24 hours would reshape one struggling single father's world entirely. A powerful CEO refused to honor a modest $199 repair bill, publicly humiliated him, and left the lot certain she had come out on top. But by the following dawn, a sleek black sedan pulled up to that same garage carrying a man whose actions would leave the entire community stunned. The town of Ashford was the kind of place where neighbors still waved from front porches and shopkeepers remembered your order by heart. Tucked between open farmland and quiet back roads, life there moved at a gentler pace. On the outskirts of town, inside a modest repair shop, worked a mechanic named Ryder Calloway. Ryder was 38 years old, raising his 9-year-old daughter Tessa entirely on his own. 3 years prior, his wife had passed away after a sudden illness, leaving behind a devastated husband and a little girl who needed her father to be everything. Every single day since then had become a careful balancing act between fatherhood and keeping a fragile business alive. The garage itself was far from impressive. Paint curled off the exterior walls. The waiting area chairs had seen better decades. The coffee maker operated purely on its own schedule. But what the shop lacked in polish, it made up for in something far more rare. Ryder ran his business with unwavering honesty. He never recommended repairs that weren't needed. When a part could be salvaged instead of swapped out, he salvaged it. When a customer couldn't manage full payment up front, he found a way to work with them. In a business world increasingly driven by margins and shortcuts, Ryder still placed people first. The trouble was, goodness didn't keep the lights on. That year had been particularly brutal. A large corporate auto service chain had opened about 30 miles away, pulling away a steady stream of loyal customers. Bills multiplied on his desk. The mortgage had fallen behind. The utility company had issued yet another warning. And still, each morning, Ryder pulled open the garage doors and got to work because Tessa was counting on him. One clear Tuesday afternoon, a gleaming silver SUV glided into the parking lot. Before the driver had even stepped out, everyone in the area sensed this vehicle belonged to someone of significance. The woman who emerged carried herself with the kind of confidence that commands attention instantly. Dressed in a sharp, tailored suit with designer sunglasses perched on her face, she was Victoria Sterling, founder and CEO of one of the state's most rapidly expanding technology firms. Victoria had earned recognition through magazine profiles, television appearances, and the admiration of investors everywhere. She was equally known, however, for being exacting, impatient, and ruthlessly results-oriented. She explained that her SUV had begun overheating unexpectedly during a business trip, and that every major service center within reach was booked out for days. Ryder looked the vehicle over and quickly pinpointed the issue, a damaged cooling hose and a thermostat that had given out. The fix was manageable. He skipped his lunch break and had the vehicle running perfectly within a few hours. When Victoria returned that evening and received the invoice, the total read $199. What should have been a routine handoff turned into something Ryder would carry with him for a long time. Victoria examined the bill as though it were an offense. Her expression sharpened. She argued the price was excessive, questioned the legitimacy of the charges, and challenged Ryder's professionalism in front of everyone nearby. Staff and customers stood in uncomfortable silence as the tension built. Ryder stayed composed throughout. He walked her through each component, each labor charge, and even showed her the damaged parts he had removed from her vehicle. It made no difference. Victoria ultimately refused to pay a single dollar. She accused him of attempting to take advantage of her, turned on her heel, and drove away. The silence she left behind felt suffocating. For someone in Victoria's position, $199 was forgettable. For Ryder, it was groceries. It was part of the electric bill. It was a contribution toward Tessa's school needs. Watching those taillights vanish down the road, he didn't feel rage. He felt something quieter and heavier. Disappointment. He had spent years extending grace to strangers, and now someone with more resources than he could fathom had decided his labor held no worth. That evening, after locking up, he collected Tessa from soccer practice. She spotted the weight behind his eyes the moment she saw him. Children are perceptive in ways adults underestimate. Over dinner that night, she quietly slipped a small folded piece of paper next to his plate. It read, "You're the best dad in the world. Things always get better." Ryder smiled through the ache in his chest and tucked the note into his wallet. Later, after Tessa had drifted off to sleep, he sat alone in the office, surrounded by unpaid invoices. The numbers blurred. He began to wonder how much longer he could realistically hold on. Across town, a different kind of evening was playing out. Victoria had arrived at the Sterling family estate for dinner with her father, Theodore Sterling. Theodore was 72 years old, a man who had constructed a manufacturing empire long before his daughter ever launched a tech company. Unlike Victoria, he preferred to operate outside the spotlight. Despite his considerable wealth, he carried himself with quiet humility, a quality rooted in a childhood spent with very little. He had deep respect for working people because he had once been one himself. Over dinner, Victoria recounted her afternoon at the garage almost offhandedly, expecting her father to share her perspective. Theodore listened without interrupting. When she finished speaking, the atmosphere in the room had shifted noticeably. He asked her two simple questions. Had the mechanic completed the repair correctly? She acknowledged he had. Had the price been reasonable? She admitted it was. Theodore set his fork down, gazed silently through the dining room window for a long moment, then quietly excused himself from the table. That night he began making calls. One conversation led to another, and by midnight he had pieced together a detailed picture of who Ryder Calloway actually was. He heard from people across Ashford about emergency repairs done at no charge for families in crisis. He learned about elderly residents whose vehicles Ryder had serviced for free. He discovered that Ryder had quietly and anonymously funded scholarships for students who couldn't afford their education. And throughout all of it, Ryder had never sought recognition. He gave because giving was simply the right thing to do. Theodore barely slept that night. By the time morning arrived, his mind was clear. Ryder's day began the same way it always did. He unlocked the garage, flipped on the lights, coaxed the coffee maker to life, and steadied himself for whatever the hours ahead might bring. At exactly 8 minutes past 8 in the morning, a long black luxury sedan pulled slowly into the lot. Everyone in the garage went still. Theodore Sterling stepped out and walked toward Ryder with a firm, warm handshake, then asked if they might speak privately. Inside the small office, Ryder calmly described the previous day's events. He never expressed bitterness. He never spoke poorly of Victoria. He presented the situation plainly and honestly. Theodore listened, nodded, and then placed a thick envelope on the desk between them. Ryder assumed it held payment for the repair, or perhaps a formal apology. What he found inside stopped him cold. A certified check. $19 million. For several seconds, he couldn't find his breath. He was certain there had been some kind of error. Theodore explained it all. Years earlier, he had quietly established a private investment fund with one purpose: to support extraordinary individuals whose integrity actively made their communities stronger. Teachers, first responders, healthcare workers, small business owners, people who gave without calculation. After learning about Ryder, Theodore was convinced he had found another person deserving of recognition. The money wasn't given out of pity. It was an investment in a man who had already been investing in others for years without expecting anything in return. Tears gathered in Ryder's eyes. He looked at the check, then at the photographs of Tessa that covered the wall behind his desk. Every exhausting night, every sacrifice quietly made, every moment he had chosen to do right over doing well. In an instant, every one of those choices felt validated. Word moved through Ashford quickly. But what resonated with people wasn't the dollar amount, it was the reason. Theodore later said publicly that wealth holds no meaning unless it's used to acknowledge character. The world is generous in rewarding power and influence, he explained, but it frequently neglects to reward decency. In the months that followed, Ryder rebuilt, not just his own life, but the fabric of his community. He expanded the garage and brought on local workers. He launched an apprenticeship program for aspiring young mechanics. He created an emergency repair fund to help struggling families keep their vehicles running. He quietly settled debts for several widows and veterans living in Ashford. And through all of it, he remained the same man, arriving each morning with grease-worn hands and a full heart. The experience changed Victoria too. Watching her father publicly honor a man she had dismissed forced her to sit with truths about herself she had long avoided. Gradually, she grew softer, more thoughtful, and more attentive to the people who existed behind every service she took for granted. Years later, anyone walking into Ryder's garage would notice something hanging beside the office door. Not the check, not a framed news article, not a trophy or an award. A small, handwritten note from a 9-year-old girl on one of her father's hardest nights. "You're the best dad in the world. Things always get better." 6 words that had quietly predicted everything. Ryder Calloway never accumulated wealth by chasing it. He built something far more enduring first. A name that meant honesty, a presence that meant compassion, and a love for his daughter that anchored everything he did. In the end, the world simply gave back a portion of what he had already been giving away for years. And that is why the most meaningful investments are never made in markets or enterprises. They are made in people.